Hi, everybody. Dr. Erin Patterson here, and we are bringing you a brand new podcast, YouTube channel, all of the things, called ADHD Queens. Always distracted and hyper dope, where we're going to talk about all things ADHD. What's it like living with ADHD? What's it like treating ADHD? What does ADHD look like that we might not think that it looks like? So hopefully this will be a place where we can all come together and talk about all of the things. Let me tell you how I came to be an ADHD queen. There's first biologically I am, but also professionally. So I have been a counselor in the mental health field for many, many years, and somewhere about, what year is this? 8 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I was noticing that I was having a lot of women in particular coming in talking about depression and anxiety, and they were doing all of the things to be treated for depression and anxiety, but they weren't feeling any better. So I had this one client who, as we were talking one day, I said to her, I think you might have ADHD, and we need to look at that, because if that's really what's causing the depression and anxiety symptoms, then you're not going to get any better by treating depression and anxiety when it's not actually depression and anxiety. Also, pay no attention to the puppy behind the scenes. She may or may not make a scene. But this is Ruby Jane. Say hello. She's like, no, thank you, not today. Hi. Hopefully she'll be good and not be too distracting. So it was at that point that I started paying attention to possible ADHD presentations, especially in women that maybe had been overlooked for their entire lives. And somewhere along the line, I also got diagnosed with ADHD myself. I had always teased that I had a little ADHD. And one year I had an intern with me who very kindly but seriously said, no, I think you need to get that checked out. So it was several years after that that I actually decided to go and get diagnosed once I forgot to pay the power bill. And the power was shut off in the middle of summer, and I came home and the dogs were panting ferociously because they'd been in the house cooking all day, that I decided I might be handling too many things at one time, and maybe I do need to go and see if ADHD is part of the picture. So I went and did this computer test, and you sit down in front of this computer and it shows you shapes that are different colors. And you have to remember the last shape. Is this shape the same shape as the last shape, or is this a different color? And you have to hit the space bar. But you have to remember all the rules, and they rapid fire them at you. And then you're wearing this thing on your head that tracks your movement while you're taking the test. Here, when I do this, a little picture is going to pop up. It's going to be like magic. Here is what someone, a 37-year-old adult being assessed for ADHD who does not have ADHD, this is what their head movement looks like during a 20-minute test. This is what Dr. P's looks like right here. So you'll see I'm a very wiggly person. That would be the H in the ADHD. And so I got my results and I talked to the doctor, and the doctor asked me, why are you just now getting diagnosed with this? You've been in the field for years. You're 37 years old. And I essentially told him because the shit hit the fan and I need some help functioning because I am no longer functioning. So I got medicated and things have been better since I was able to finish my doctorate. And essentially my dissertation is in the gender differences in symptom presentation of ADHD and why it gets so overlooked in women in particular. But it's not just women who are overlooked. It's also just the non-hyperactive presentation of ADHD, where people are a little more daydreamy and a little more falling asleep during class rather than throwing pencils across the classroom. Oh my God, no! That's my shoe! Okay. Oh, what was I talking about? Oh, my dissertation. So I did a literature review and researched all of the available research that had already been done that I could get my hands on to try to find what are the different symptom presentations for ADHD in women. How does it look different? What's going on that people are missing? And we found lots of interesting things. And so the next step would be, how do we get people aware that this is what ADHD looks like? So that's where this channel comes in, hopefully, so we can help people identify maybe a missing piece. Let's talk about the history of ADHD. When a clinician, whether it's a doctor or a therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, is diagnosing any mental issue, is diagnosing any mental health concern, we rely on this book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders. And we are in the 5th text revision version of that, which there's probably 8 of them altogether, not just 5. But this one was released in 2023. So this is the most up-to-date information. It's so beautiful. And my lovely assistant tabbed it, which makes it so easy to find what you're looking for. So this has all of the diagnostic criteria for ADHD in it, and it has come a long way over the years. Because if we look back at the 1968 DSM, this is the second one. I did not purchase the first one because apparently it's collectible and it's like $1,400, and I'm not doing that. But this is the description of ADHD back in 1968, which did not have a lot of information with it. In fact, it's this tiny little paragraph right here, and it was called Hyperkinetic Reaction of Childhood or Adolescence. Sounds interesting, right? And all it says is, this disorder is characterized by overactivity, restlessness, distractibility, and short attention span, especially in young children. The behavior usually diminishes in adolescence. That's all I got. 2 sentences, 2 measly little sentences. And while that was pretty accurate and still is, there's a lot of pieces missing from it. And the hyperactivity and the restlessness is not always apparent in women presenting with ADHD or girls presenting with ADHD. Think back to high school biology when you're learning all of the little pieces of the brain, and the part of the brain that is responsible for motor activity is called the motor cortex, or M1, like a fancy jet plane. But when we think about typically like shoe sizes for boys and girls or men and women, for the most part, men are going to be wearing larger shoe sizes than females. And so there are bodily differences. Hand sizes are smaller, head circumferences are smaller. Therefore, the motor cortex in the brain is also smaller, which means that the activity that shows up as hyperactivity is not nearly as pronounced as it would be in little boys. The little boys might be jumping around the classroom or throwing pencils, whereas the little girls are doodling in their notebooks, or they're clicking their pencil lid, or they're twirling their hair. That's the big one. That's my fidget. Or they're staring, or they're scratching their nose. Oh my gosh, I can't. It's just so itchy. Why is it so itchy? I think I got too much sun this weekend playing terrible golf. And so most of the time, little girls are not disrupting the classroom. Therefore, teachers are not necessarily on the lookout for the distracted girls. They say things about them like, oh, she's such a social butterfly because she talks too much, or she's a daydreamer. She won't stop staring out the window. Things like that, rather than he's disrupting the whole class and we need to get him medicated. And so girls often make it further into life before they get diagnosed with ADHD. Girls are also masking very well. We get lots of messages from society and everywhere else. Don't do that. Sit down. Don't talk so loud. That's not ladylike. All of these things that cause us to be very conscientious of our behaviors. And therefore, we know I don't want to get in trouble in class for getting up out of my seat, even though I have the urge to do so desperately. And so I make an excuse to get up out of my seat that's socially acceptable. I need to sharpen my pencil, or I need a drink of water, or I need to go to the bathroom. And so we're still having the movement and the activity, but we make it look much more socially acceptable. And so it gets overlooked for years and years. But then what happens is at some point, we get overwhelmed by all of the things that we have to do, whether it's housework or just working out in the professional field. And maybe one part of your life is all put together and you look great at work and, your stuff is done and it's turned in on time and it's a hot mess on the inside, but it looks good on the outside. And then you get home and home looks like a train wreck. The laundry's piled up. You're having to rewash the laundry because you forgot to move it over to the dryer and now it's sour. And we use double the laundry detergent. By the way, that's lovingly called an ADHD tax. The amount of money you have to pay because your ADHD made you screw something up. So maybe with laundry, you buy double the laundry detergent because you're having to rewash your clothes all the time. Or maybe you did like me and get to the airport, supposed to have a nice trip to New York City with your sister to go watch a bunch of Broadway shows. And you pull up and you say, I can't find my ticket in the kiosk. And the man says, oh, well, you're just a week early. And I said, oh, no, I'm not a week early. I have tickets to see Moulin Rouge on Broadway tonight at 8 o'clock. And he says, well, you don't have a plane ticket until next Friday. And then you have to spend, several hundreds of dollars to buy a ticket at the airport to get to New York City to see Moulin Rouge. That's an ADHD tax. So it shows up in lots of different ways. And I think it's important for us to know what are some of those ways and how does that create this cycle of what looks like depression and anxiety for us. So we get overwhelmed by all of the things that we have to do. It feels like anxiety, but it's a little bit different biologically. And then we don't do anything. Maybe we can't decide what needs to be done. Everything feels like it's so important and we need to do it all right now. And then we get overwhelmed and shut down and don't do anything. Or we do something that's completely not related. Like instead of doing your, cleaning for the week, you decide to binge watch a TV show or play on your little phone game for hours or doom scroll or just rot in the bed, because all of those are way more fun than actually doing dishes and laundry and those sorts of things. And then because we've done that, we get in our head and we start to beat ourselves up about, why can't I just do this? My house is such a mess. My life is such a mess. And we're having all this negative self-talk, which then makes us feel depressed. Or maybe we decide we're going to go to sleep and just sleep to ignore it. So when we go and talk to the doctors, we're saying things like, I'm having trouble getting things done. I feel anxious a lot. I'm having trouble getting out of bed. I don't feel motivated. And the doctors go, oh, wow, this looks like depression and anxiety. Let me give you an SSRI. This will help. So they give us something like Zoloft or Paxil or Lexapro, something like that. And, you take it for a couple of weeks and they're like, is it feeling any better? And you're like, well, I don't know. So they up it and then it takes another 4 weeks to get in your system. And really, it's not helping anything because it's not biological depression. It's not a serotonin issue. It's a dopamine issue. So you can't treat a dopamine issue by taking serotonin. It just doesn't work. It's like, I don't know, trying to make biscuits with no fat. And if you're not from the South and you've never made homemade biscuits, then you're not going to get that reference at all. But nevertheless, if you don't have a serotonin issue, taking serotonin is not going to do anything to help you. The problem with the ADHD brain is that it makes less dopamine than a non-ADHD brain. So we're already at a deficit. And a non-ADHD brain has a level of dopamine, and then, it kind of trails off around 3 o'clock or something like that. They have a candy bar, a cup of coffee, and then they make it through the rest of the day, and it's relatively okay. But the ADHD brain starts out lower, and the dopamine that it does produce is absorbed very quickly. We'll do a whole nother one on this stuff later. But so we're going from task to task because task switching actually produces dopamine. So we're starting at a lower amount of dopamine and it goes away very quickly. And we're working on our paperwork or whatever we're doing for work. And we're like, oh my God, I'm bored. I need to go clean the toilet. So we leave and go clean the toilet. And then we get distracted doing something else. And then so all day long, we're just chasing these dopamine hits because every time you switch tasks, you get more dopamine. Or every time you go talk to somebody, you get dopamine. That's why girls are very talkative a lot of times when they have ADHD. So we're just little crackheads chasing around our next hit of dopamine all day. Vocabulary word, dopaminergic. Put that on the screen right there. Dopaminergic means something that produces dopamine, creates dopamine. There's probably a legit Webster's dictionary definition that we could teach you, but I'm going to teach you Dr. P's version of dopaminergic. So when you're looking at, I have 3 or 4 tasks that I need to do, your brain is going to select the task that is the most dopaminergic, meaning whatever's going to give you the most dopamine. And I promise you that filing your taxes is not number 1 on the list. But it might be, oh, I'm going to do this random craft, or I'm going to reorganize this drawer, even though that's not what needs to be done at all. So because we get overwhelmed with tasks that we feel like are going to be difficult or take a long time, we avoid them, and then we pick things that seem more fun or dopaminergic at the time, which often leads us to doing a lot but not getting a lot done, which is why I hate that they call it attention deficit disorder. I do not have a deficit of attention. I have plenty of attention. It just goes the wrong direction. So we should call it attention regulation disorder is what we should call it. Speaking of medication, let's talk about ways to supplement dopamine that may not be just medication-wise. So what the medication does for the ADHD brain is it puts more dopamine into the system, and it also blocks the brain from absorbing it so fast. So it essentially cuts off the little vacuum that's sucking the neurotransmitter back up. And so it allows the the ADHD brain to have more dopamine, which puts it closer to the dopamine levels of a person who doesn't have ADHD, which means we can sustain our focus for longer periods of time, or we can regulate our emotions a little better. We're not as sensitive to sensory overload or criticism, which causes us to have little meltdowns or big meltdowns every once in a while. So there are other ways than just medication to supplement dopamine in the brain. Think about what are the ways you're trying to get dopamine anyway. A lot of people self-medicate with caffeine, lots and lots of caffeine. I love my caffeine. I was caffeine free for many, many years, but now I'm like, nope, I need the caffeine also. And not to say that, I'm recommending you go self-medicate with caffeine. There are also supplements and stuff that you can take in. But the biggest thing is learning more about ADHD, how it manifests in your life. And a big part of living with ADHD is shame and guilt that we feel around not being able to get the stuff done or the way that our brains work or being reactive. And so for me, a big part of treating ADHD without the medication is not necessarily supplements and diet and exercise, although that stuff can help, but it's really learning how to talk to yourself in a way that you're not putting yourself down all the time, that understanding, okay, this is how my brain works and it's going to happen. That's not to say that it's an excuse for bad behavior or not getting things done, but it is an explanation for it. And when you realize sometimes my brain is just going to do this, you can kind of cut yourself a break and not beat yourself up, which then also makes us even less functional. That's a big part of what therapy is helpful for, because you can go to the doctor and get some medication and okay, this helps a little bit, but you're still going to keep beating yourself up and shaming yourself and all of those things that emotionally are just making it harder. We're going to have more episodes about how to hack your life living with ADHD. Like, what are ways that I can hack the laundry? And what are ways that I can hack my social life? And what are ways that I can make this easier and that easier? And so one of the things that I want to do is collect all of your questions to make sure that we're talking about the things that are important to you. Today is just kind of an introduction so that you can get to know me a little bit and maybe a little bit about the history of ADHD and how I got into this as my practice area. But I really want this to be a place where we can talk about ADHD and figure out ways to live better with it. Oh! I'm working on helping other people not feel so bad that their brains do that too. So this channel is going to be what it is. And if the dog crashes things, we're just going to let it play. I mean, we're going to edit out some of it so it's not so boring to you. But in the meantime, this is me. You're just hanging out with me. And so we would love to hear what you think about all of this. Maybe one day we'll have some guests on here. I don't know. We'll see. What are you called back there? The producer? Are you the producer? I guess my director and producer says yes. We should definitely get some guests on here. But in the meantime, until we figure out how to do that, I mean, she probably knows, but I don't know. We're just going to take questions and hopefully go through and help y'all have some fun and feel good about yourselves, okay? Because we might have ADHD, but we're queens with ADHD. So, always distracted and hyper dope. Thanks for joining us. Hit all the buttons. Comment, like. There's a bell somewhere that will tell you that we've posted so you don't miss anything from us. Because that would be tragic. And you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. All right, until next time, stay dope, queens.